So we have as our guest speaker today, Suzanne Guisemann. I've been mispronouncing it all this time. It's Guisemann, not Guisemann. And she is making quite a splash in the metaphysical world, in the world of spirituality. And we are so blessed to have her here. She has an incredible story, part of which she is going to share with you now. So without any further ado, please let me welcome to you Suzanne Guisemann.
Good morning. Thank you, Kat. What beautiful music. What a great way to start the day. This is so unusual for me to have people with this kind of perspective. It's kind of like you all have the soul's perspective on your lives, looking down on the stage of life. That's kind of cool. Good metaphor. I'm here with my husband, Ty. We're in 4 months into a 5-month tour around the U.S. and Canada, and this is such a treat to speak here with all of you. What I'm going to talk to you about this morning is up here. 3 spiritual virtues about which all of you are familiar. Faith, hope, and love. But from a different perspective, kind of from the perspective that you have now sitting out there, looking down on us, from those who have passed to the other side. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm an evidential medium, and that means that I regularly communicate with those who have passed to the other side, to show their loved ones, to show all of you that those you think you have lost are really still with you. It's really amazing because I sit with people I've never met before, and unlike in family therapy that could take months to get these issues out on the table, within minutes I am in the most private areas of people's lives, because when you're talking to spirit, there's nothing hidden. It's all right out there. And that's quite an honor to be able to instantly give somebody back hope, to let them know that love is eternal. And that's what happens when you can show someone with evidence that love never dies. Now, it wasn't always an evidential medium. I've now given somewhere over 700 readings. I stopped counting finally, and why I say finally is because I was so left-brained for so long that I had to keep very good records of how many readings and how good they were and all that. Why was I left-brained? Because for 20 years I was a U.S. Navy officer. And I retired as a Navy commander after serving at the highest levels of the U.S. Navy. And I'm not just kidding you. I mean, I got to be a commanding officer. My husband was a commanding officer of a destroyer, very left-brained also. But I also was special assistant to the head of the Navy, the Chief of Naval Operations, and then was asked by the head of the entire United States military, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to be his right-hand man, his aide. And that was pretty cool, you know, flying around on Air Force One with the president, meeting kings and queens, sitting in on top-secret hearings on Capitol Hill. So you think it's a bit of a switch doing what I do now? Just a little bit. How did that come about? Well, unfortunately, as many people know who start on the spiritual path late in life, it came about as a result of tragedy. And that was the very unexpected death of my stepdaughter, Ty's daughter, Susan, who was struck and killed by lightning 8 years ago. She was 27 years old. She was 6 months pregnant at the time. So that was a big tragedy for us, and that's what led us to go consult a medium. You will put your left brain aside when you want to have hope. And that's what happened, and it's a long story. I won't go into it here, but I discovered then, after that reading with that medium, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, that I can communicate with the spirit world as well. I discovered then that there is a spirit world, that we do go on, that we are spirit here and now, which many of you already know, but some of you only go on faith. Some of you only hope. I have the full knowing now. And how do I have that knowing? Because of the evidence that I insist on from those on the other side, because of my background. And you know, they don't mind giving it to us. They want to let you know we're here. We're here sitting with you now. We're the ones that urged some of you to come here today when you're wondering, what am I doing here? So I wanted to share with you just a couple stories of people who had lost faith and lost hope and have found it again by discovering our loved ones aren't truly gone forever. I know that I met a couple of you in the lobby who have lost sons, so I'm happy to start with a story of a woman that lost a son and found out she didn't really lose him. Ty and I were getting ready for this 5-month trip. We're traveling around in a big coach, and it takes several days to pack it and take everything in the house and put it in the coach. So it was very busy getting ready for this trip, and my assistant called me. She said, Suzanne, I just got a call from a woman. She said she's had a loss and she'd really like a reading with you. And my assistant knows that I have this year-long waiting list and that I normally have trouble fitting people in, and especially at the last minute. And I said, please tell her that she'll just have to wait. Well, she called me back a couple days later. She said, Suzanne, that woman called again, and she's crying. That was all I needed to hear. I said, Bev, okay, have her come over in the morning at 9, but we're going to be loading the coach. So here comes this lady, and the coach is blocking the whole driveway, and Ty is carrying boxes back and forth. And I sat with her in my study, and I can see him out through the window. And I told her, I have to apologize in advance. I don't know how well this is going to go because I'm a bit distracted in this physical world here with all that's going on, but I'll do my best to connect with your loved ones. I don't know who you lost, but let's see what happens. And I set that intention, and I shifted my consciousness to the greater part of all of us, the spirit. And right away, I knew why she'd been crying. I said, I lost a son, and I feel him. And she said, yes, and she could barely talk. And I said, this feels like it was not an illness that took him. In fact, there were drugs, something about drugs with him. And I said, uh-oh, I see my sign for somebody who took his own life. And she said, yes. So I asked him, how did you do it? And I said, oh my goodness. He says he jumped. And she said, yes, he did. And I said, from a bridge, yes. Do you see what I mean about evidence? How could I have known these things? You may think I'm reading her mind. Stick with me and I'll show you how I know I wasn't. But I said, okay, we're sitting here in Florida, but there's a New York connection here. She said, yes, there is. And I said, Brooklyn. Did he jump off the Brooklyn Bridge? She said, no. Do you want me to tell you? I said, don't tell me. He'll tell me. Which bridge was it? He says, it was the Verrazano Bridge. She said, yes, I want to come out of the chair when things like this happen. This is awesome to me. This shows me they're right here. So I went on and I said, tell me what happened. I said, he's saying there was a problem. It wasn't drugs he was using. He was on medication, but he wasn't taking the medication. That he really didn't plan this, Mom. This was not premeditated. You were really taken by surprise by this. And she said, yes, yes. And he told me a name. He said, well, I don't want to say it, but he told me a last name. And she said that was his psychologist's name. I said, really? Because to get a name is really good, a last name. Very clear connection. And it went on like that. I said, he's talking about somebody named James. She said, oh, James is his best friend. I said, and James is playing a guitar. She said, yeah, they were in a band together. I said, oh, really? So I said to her son, what did you play? He was the drummer guy. And she said, yes, he played the drums. So went on and on like that. And what was the other thing? I have the list of evidence here because I don't want to miss a thing here. Oh, all of a sudden, he's showing me this in my mind's eye. When I see this, that's injectable drugs. I said, somebody's doing injectable drugs, but it's not him. He's talking about his brother. She said, yes, he's in trouble. I said, I think he's in more trouble than you are aware. He shows me bars, there's jail time. Yes, he did jail. I said, for larceny. Yes, it was for larceny. And I said, you need to understand how concerned your son is about his brother. She said, I'm concerned too. And I told her, he's telling me he's doing everything he can to steer his brother on the right path. And he's talking about a Mikey. And she finally lit up. She said, that's him. I said, Mikey? Names are good. That really shows people they're there. And she said, yeah, that was his name. So I have this list of things that I like to hear from them. List of evidence that really convinces people their loved ones are still here. And one of the things that he hadn't yet told me was, what kind of work did you do? So I asked him, what work did you do? I couldn't hear it, but in my mind's eye, he swept his hand out like this, and he showed me outside the window. He said, what your husband is doing now. And Ty was bending down at the rear of the coach at the trailer hitch that we tow our car with, stripping wires for a connector cable. And I looked at him and I said, you were an electrician? And she looked and she heard me speaking out loud. She said, he was an electrician. That is so awesome. This is what I mean by I wasn't reading her mind. She had no idea that I had mentally asked him, what did you do? And she wouldn't have said what your husband's doing because she couldn't see him from the way she was sitting. Do you get that? They're right here. So at the very end, I said, do you have a really good message for your mom so she knows you're here, something current? And he said, talk about the tattoo. I said, I'm supposed to talk about some tattoo. Did he have a special tattoo? And she said, no. And she started to roll up her sleeve, and I said, and there's something about song lyrics. She rolled up her sleeve the rest of the way, and there's a tattoo that she and the friend James from the band had on their arms in his memory with his favorite song lyrics on it. Do you see? That woman came in crying. And as she walked out to the driveway, Ty was coming back in to get another load of stuff to carry out. And she looked at him, and what did she say, Ty? I'm happy now. She came in with just hope beyond hope, that she would find evidence that her son was still with her. She came because she had faith that this isn't just woo-woo stuff, this mediumship stuff, that it's real. That there are some people who, by the grace of God, have been blessed with a little bit finer attunement, that they can sense those that are around us, that are around all of you right now. But perhaps you just can't sense them. So it's such an honor for me to show you, through the evidence, through the permission given to me by that mother, to share with you her happiness, that she now knows that love is eternal. It changes everything. Yes, I know from having had a reading where our Susan came through, that one thing it doesn't change is you can't touch them. You can't hear them so clearly, but then now you can have faith that they hear you. That is one of my central messages. Please talk to your loved ones. They hear you. You may not hear them back, but boy, do they hear you. Every reading I give, they give me evidence of things you're doing now. They attend their memorial services. They attend the graduation services that you think they missed. They're there at the birth of your grandchildren. They're around you. So I had another lady sent me an email. Please may I get on your waiting list. In fact, I don't even want to wait. Please may I see you sooner rather than later. I need a reading. And I wrote back and I said, you'll just have to wait a little bit. And she said, no, I need it now. He was kind of aggressive. And in fact, I agreed to give the reading now, not because she was crying, but because I knew she wasn't going to leave me alone. So this was going to be a phone reading. We were traveling, so I get her on the phone, and I tuned in. Didn't sense any children that she had lost. Didn't sense that she'd lost a partner. Couldn't even sense her parents on the other side. All I sensed was a dog. I said, well, I sense a little dog here. She said, well, that's one that I wanted to hear from. I said, really? I said, well, okay, let me see if I can get evidence from your dog. And I have gotten evidence from animals, and it's pretty convincing that when you love a little pet, trust me, they're there to greet you when you pass to the other side. But this dog, it showed me digging, and bringing up this big black beetle. Now, how bizarre is that? And she said, oh, I have this specific memory of it, this great big black beetle. And I described what he looked like. She said, that's him. And I said, now, there's something really special about this dog. He's talking about a carriage. And she started crying. She said, you could not have said anything better. The dog was paralyzed from the waist down, or waist back, I guess, with the dog, right? And it walked around in a little carriage. How's that for evidence? So then I tuned in some more, and I said, there is one man here. He's telling me he's your uncle. She said, that's who I wanted to hear from. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, all these other people who've lost children, who've lost partners, who are trying to have a reading, and this woman was so desperate to hear from her dog and her uncle. But you know, we have certain expectations, and we think that love can only come from these special people. But I want to share with you how special it was and how life-changing it was to hear from an uncle. When I tuned into this man, I was really surprised at how he felt. The word that came to mind was curmudgeon. Do you know that word? It's a crotchety old man. This guy showed me he had trouble feeling love when he was here. In fact, he was just downright ornery and stubborn and not very nice. Let that be a lesson to you. He still felt like that on the other side. Hadn't been gone that long. I shared this last night in the workshop. Just because you pass to the other side doesn't mean you immediately sprout angel wings. You grow them here. Okay? So I'm talking to this man. I said, he's showing me, this is your father's brother. She said, yes, that's why I wanted to hear from him, to let my father know he's still around. I said, he's showing me a ring like a high school ring. It's a big man's ring, and there are two of them, the same. And she said, well, he and my father are twins. They were the same. I said, no, it's the ring. She said, I don't know anything about that. I was on the phone. I couldn't see her arms crossed, but let me tell you, that's how she felt to me. Very difficult energy hers was, and the reading the whole thing didn't feel good to me, because a lot of things I said she couldn't identify until I said the name Darcy. Does that mean anything to you, Darcy? And she said, more than you know. And I said, well, all those other things I told you, you go and check with your dad and see if that has any meaning to him. So she emailed me back. And it's funny about expectations and assumptions. What I thought was just a reading for an uncle and a dog was actually one of the most meaningful readings I've ever given. And I want to share with you the email that she sent me. This is from the client. When I shared the details of this reading with my dad, it affected him on a deep and profound level. When the name Darcy came up in regard to my uncle, well, this name for his daughter is something no one outside our family has ever known. It's a family secret, never even whispered about. When I told my father this, he cried. I don't think I've ever seen him cry before. He went into his room and laid on the bed for 3 hours, something else he has never done before. She also told me about those rings. Turns out it was far more significant than she thought, because her father's mother had given those rings to both of her sons. Dad still had his in a jewelry box, had never shown it to his daughter, so she didn't know about it. Yet another example of not reading the client's mind. This is the uncle on the other side saying, talk about those rings. And boy, did that strike home with Dad. Okay. As I mentioned, I care for my father in my home. He is 89 years old. It has been difficult to watch him age. Cancer, heart attack, stroke, and more. I could always feel his fear of death and wanted to help him to stop his suffering. I've always felt in my heart that there's no reason to fear death, that something incredibly beautiful, a pure love beyond human comprehension awaits us, but I could never prove it. Now I have all the evidence I need. It has opened his heart, I believe, to a miracle that will bring him peace and comfort as he transitions from this physical reality. And you see, I thought she only wanted to hear from her uncle. That was transformational for her father. She did it as a gift to him. But it had even more far-reaching effects than I knew. It didn't just affect him as he laid on the bed for 3 hours, trying to process how this medium knew those things about his brother, trying to change his worldview and say, you mean I really will see him again? It changed him on a heart level. And she showed that to me several months later when she sent me a follow-up email. You may not remember my reading, but you were correct. My uncle was a man who didn't know how to give or show love. He was a man who suffered greatly and saw little joy in his life. My father was his twin in every way. Since I shared the messages from your reading with my father, he has shown signs of opening his heart. The most recent was just the other evening. As we were sitting in the living room watching one of his favorite programs, he turned the sound off and said to me, "Did you see the beautiful sunrise this morning? The sky had such a pretty pink color in it." Now I know this may seem like a small thing to most people, but I remember throughout my lifetime looking up into the sky and filled with awe and wonder, sometimes with tears in my eyes, saying to my father what a beautifully gorgeous sunrise it was. His reply, without ever looking up, was to grumble, roll his eyes, and say, "For God's sake, Sherry, haven't you ever seen a sunrise before?" Over these past few years, as I've watched my father age and his health fail, it has been my greatest wish to show him there is such beauty and joy and love and wonder in this life. My messages have never really seemed to get through to him. His brothers did. You helped my 89-year-old father to see the sunrise, truly see the sunrise for the first time in his life. Isn't that awesome? That's why I call this sacred work that I do. That is why I call myself a messenger of hope. That's what this is all about. That's why I can go from being a Navy officer to stepping out and saying, there is a spirit world. You are all beautiful spirits here and now, temporarily having this experience as a human to get it right, to learn how to love each other. And so about a month into this tour that we're on, I got to speak at a Unity church in North Carolina. And they had a great big parking lot and a big plot of land, and they said, "Park your coach right here by the church." So we parked there, and I said, "Oh my gosh, Ty, how perfect is this? Look, there's a labyrinth right beside the coach." I don't know if you're familiar with labyrinths, like a big maze in the ground that you walk in a circular fashion until you get to the center. And on the way, you become contemplative, and it's like a journey to the center of you. And at the center, hopefully something has changed in you as you reverse direction and come back out into your life in human form. So I said, Ty, I'm going to go walk that labyrinth tonight. So I started walking in a circle, and I'm very contemplative. And I got about halfway down through, and I looked down on the ground, and there's this little token. It kind of looked like a little dog collar token, a red heart. And I picked it up, and it said love on it. And I thought, oh, this is so symbolic of us on the path to find love here in human form. And it was so special to find it there. And for a moment, I wanted to keep it just as a memento of that moment and how grateful I was for being able to go and share these messages. And then I thought, no, this is meant to be shared. It's meant to be found by someone else. It's meant to be carried forward. So I carried it with me forward as I walked the rest of that labyrinth till I got to the center. And I said, this is where I need to leave this heart, because this is where love resides in all of us, in the center. And as I bent down to leave it, right in the center of that labyrinth, and I made this motion, I flashed back to the worst moment of my life. When we visited the spot where our Susan was struck by lightning, and I bent down to touch the ground where she took her last breath. And at that moment when I touched the ground there in North Carolina, I had lost hope. But she was just taken just like that. But I had faith that somehow we would hear from her again. And that's what led us to see a medium who knew nothing about us. And that medium says, you know, there's a young woman here who seems to have died rather young in her 20s. And I suddenly have the headache of Zeus and Athena. You know who Zeus was? The god holding a lightning bolt. And she was struck by lightning. And that's when the tears started flowing, and I found hope again. Because there's no way that woman could have known that about Susan. And she went on to give us all kinds of evidence that shook my worldview to the core and changed that man's worldview right there. Because he's a believer too. Because the evidence will do that for you. But you know what really did it for us? when that medium said, wait, this young woman is not alone. This is your daughter, sir, because she's looking at you saying, Daddy, Daddy. But she's bringing with her a little baby boy who's hanging back shyly, as if he doesn't know you. And she wants to introduce him to you. Susan's unborn baby was a little boy, and he's still with her, and she's still with us. And all of your loved ones are so very much with you. And if I could, I would stay here all day and fill your hearts with the evidence if you needed it. But you don't need it. Just have faith. Go beyond hope and just know that love is eternal. It is impossible to kill the spirit. Love is what we are right here. And why are you still here and your loved ones are not? Because you have yet more love to give. So just open up your hearts every moment of your life, and you will be living your life on purpose. If you ever question why you're here, that's the answer. And if you can't find that love, just be still. Just go inside, and you'll find it right there. Thank you very much.